Welcome to CISO Insider, Nightfall's chat with Chief Information Security Officers. We host CISOs from different industries to discuss their pathways to the role, the challenges they face in their everyday work, and lessons they can share with anyone aspiring to become a CISO. This podcast brings you into the world of cybersecurity and gives you a window into the most brilliant minds in the business. Today on CISO Insider, it's our Season 1 recap episode, featuring the best quotes and highlights from our first 5 episodes in Season 1. We gathered insights, lessons, and other valuable soundbites from infosec leaders at Sisense, Compass, LifeOmic, and Caterpillar Financial. Every CISO faces challenges on their path to the role. What sets great leaders apart is their ability to contextualize the challenges and find solutions from their experiences. Sisense Chief Security and Trust Officer Ty Sabano shares his advice on how to determine your personal sacrifice and risk tolerance. It's a great place to start for building a defense against burnout and to achieve staying power in the role.
The big piece I'm going to focus on is kind of sacrifice and risk tolerance. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of folks end up enamored with the idea that they get a degree or they start working in a thing, in a vertical, and they're trying to specialize, but they don't open themselves up to making real sacrifices to achieve some goals. And what I mean by sacrificing risk tolerance is determining what is your balance to go and achieve these goals. For me, I grew up in a military family. We relocated a couple of times. It wasn't that crazy, but not everyone is in that mindset, right? And I think when you think about sacrifice for your career and your growth, especially early on, I moved for every job, from the first job to the second job to the third job. Now, just because of the last 2 jobs I've stayed in San Francisco, it's because now I have a lot more experience. I've decided I'm going to be here for a while, but there are just so many opportunities in San Francisco as opposed to the other locations I had moved to. Different opportunity, but at right time, right place, right offer. And when you take those types of risks, you have to evaluate what is your tolerance. And for me, being younger, it was massively wild because what do I have to lose? And now I'm in a different situation. I have some things to lose, but my risk tolerance is much higher. And for me, I reflect back on a conversation with Glenn Foster. When I told him I was leaving JP Morgan Chase to go to Capital One, he said, "Ty, I think you're taking too many risks in life right now." I'm like, "What are you talking about, Glenn?" He's like, "Well, one, you just explained to me that when you're leaving, okay, I kind of get that. We tried to work out an opportunity. It didn't seem to come to the right place. And ultimately, it's like, one, you're getting married." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a big move." He's like, "That's a big move." He's like, "2, you're taking a new job." And I'm like, "Yeah, that seems logical." And he's 3, "You're relocating for the job." He said, "Most people would be okay with 1 of those. Some people would be okay with taking 2 of those." He's like, "But doing all 3 at the same time, I think you're out of your mind." And I'm like, "But that's my risk tolerance."
Compliance regimes like GDPR and CCPA are focus areas for infosec leaders. LifeOmic Chief Legal Officer Lisa Hawk shares her perspective on how to approach privacy and data protection under these frameworks. Her approach is to embrace change management to understand how wide your scope must be to get ahead of potential data loss issues. Take a listen.
So on the privacy and data protection side, I think the biggest challenge there is just dealing with different data types and usage issues or usage use cases across the company. Privacy and data protection goes so far beyond just production data if you're a B2B SaaS company, because the definition of personal data, particularly under GDPR, is just so broad. And it's going to touch every team, not just your engineering team. And it requires a ton of change management to address sort of the actual requirements and best practices for privacy and data protection, but especially for the teams that are just not used to dealing with regulated data.
What does it take to become a great CISO? As Caterpillar Financial Services CISO Ross Young says, there's no one way to be a CISO. For our guests, success in the role comes from skills, knowledge, and values from real-world and on-the-job experience. Ross shares the value of soft skills and learning to become a people manager in his success as a CISO, something he found and reinforces through his teaching roles in cyber programs at universities like Johns Hopkins.
One of the first areas I had to grow was, instead of being technically right, How did I make sure I didn't damage the relationship when I was presenting conflicting views? And that was a difficult challenge for me. I really had to read and study a lot. Part of that involved looking at personality types and understanding Myers-Briggs. Part of it involved reading a lot of books on using challenging questions and being able to ask things a certain way to be more introspective. So, for example, I would ask a question, and if I brought one answer to the business and they gave a different answer, we're naturally fighting over the same turf, over the same dollars and resources. But if we talked about what is the shared goals and objectives we can agree to, and then we can both outline a plan and say which one is more likely to get us there. And how could this plan, if we implemented it perfectly, still not get us the right answers, the right goals and situations? And then we outline the different flaws together. And we're partnering over that and we're sharing the opportunities for the same goals and objectives. That brought a very different focus of how we could partner together. And as I started focusing and reading a lot of these, let's say, persuasion, leadership, influence topics, and listening to podcasts about it, that's where I really learned to develop some of the soft skills that I think is what is really needed. Nobody cares if you're right. They care if you can actually transform the business. And that comes through shared understanding, shared goals and alignment. And as you partner with the organization on those things, I think that's where the transformation happens.
One big takeaway from our chat with Lisa was how to learn and apply change management and risk triage. For Lisa, part of her success came from knowing the difference between getting to and succeeding in the infosec leader role and understanding how to prioritize what's thrown at her every day.
To get to the role, I think, is very different than succeeding in the role. And I have to say that when it comes to getting to the role, my personal experience is pretty unique in that I was actually hired in my company, Everla, as a director with a different title when the company was only 25 people. And my role has actually grown into what it is now. So when I see job descriptions for other CISO roles, quite frankly, I'm not sure how they find anyone who ever meets sort of all of those job qualifications and descriptions, especially if you look at my background. So the other question, though, to succeed in this role, from my perspective, there's a few critical skills that I can share. And one would be change management and sort of risk triaging in the context of your specific business and operations. And this is especially true at a startup. As a security leader, you won't be able to address every single thing, and you're going to have to choose what is most important in your business to address and what's most important to your customers and regulators.
Compass CISO JJ Aga shared the keys to success for his roles, applying the OODA loop to tough problems and taking lessons from his advisory work. Here's JJ talking about what he's gleaned from thinking outside the box and reading between the lines.
Being able to do context switching quickly, right? So, I have my process where I have to do my day-to-day, and then I also have the advisory work of, well, what are the challenges that Rohan or Isaac are having? Maybe it's not a security product decision. Maybe it's about, hey, do I have to have a conversation with the customer? Am I having a conversation with the next VC, another advisor? How can I help shape their path as a company? From being an internal, I am very closely knit, day to day with, what is our business goals, what are business initiatives. And so the context switching is a lot less. So it allows me to be fresh. It allows me to constantly take my learnings that I have day to day from my day job, apply it to the advisorship. And then even from being an advisor, I'm able to take that kind of quick, 2-hour, 3-hour hit that I might have with a company, take that back and say, all right, how they're actually approaching this is actually a better way. Let's figure out how do we need to solve it for it and provide feedback to it. And so it's this constant feedback loop. And you'll probably hear me say it multiple times in this interview of OODA loop, but it really is a gigantic OODA loop within myself of, I'm going to observe, I'm going to act, and then I'm going to make a decision, and I'm going to just constantly follow through that process.
The pandemic has thrown a lot at us in the infosec industry. CISOs and cybersecurity leaders have had to make the best of things in an unprecedented year. It's a testament to the good leaders who have been able to keep their security organizations afloat and even thriving in some cases. Success during dark times comes from different places for each leader, but a common thread we heard from our guests in Season 1 was the ability to seize opportunity to do things differently when all the rules get thrown out the window. Ross looks to what we've gained during the pandemic as a remote-first working culture and how smart infosec leaders can apply these gains to save money, time, and process in the future of work, even post-COVID.
I think the biggest thing that you're seeing because of COVID is a change to a work from home strategy. Whereas some companies may have always been a work in the office first and allow people to flex from home once or twice a week, I think we're now looking at our businesses to say, how could we be 100% remote? We've already done it for 6 months. It doesn't hurt to do this longer. And oh, by the way, we might actually gain some business benefits. We could shrink the size of our office spaces. We could recruit people from locations we've never had before. And it provides a lot of new opportunities to re-envision the workforce. So I think that's the biggest new view of an IT organization, to tap into that and provide that digital transformation that we've never had from being 100% work from home organization, or at least large parts of it. And security has a role in that, in making sure if we're going to do this as our primary strategy, how are we enabling the business to do things that they needed to do before, right? Maybe we were using printers all the time and uploading attachments, and now we have to go to a DocuSign world. Things like that, of where we look at the security to improve the business functions, is really where we're going to have to do better.
Ty sees the impacts of COVID as a challenge in his role and for those coming up in the industry as well. It's a trial by fire in many cases, but asking the right questions and relying on creativity can help mitigate the impacts of COVID on our working lives. Here's Ty.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm going to say it's going to be tough. And I think the direct impact are new hires. I hope some folks didn't have their offers pulled if they were about to start, in Q2, but I suspect that may have happened. I think internship requirements are going to be really rough as far as onboarding to most companies like ours, where we're 100% remote right now. I think that's going to be tough. Even starting in an internship right now and learning an environment that may have been an in-person culture that is now, hey, welcome to the company. Here's your laptop. Leave our office now. Go home and get set up a bunch of Zoom meetings. And they're like, is this how this works? And it's like, well, this is how this works now. So I think it's going to be a tough go for sure, given how the market is right now. I think a lot of companies are learning and figuring it out. The difference is for early stage professionals in the mix now, I think this is new for all of us. I don't know if there are too many security practitioners that have ever been through a pandemic of this level. If there have been, I haven't found them yet, and I think those are the folks that may have some secret sauce. But I think the rest of us, we worked through this. We had some high scale plans that kind of get us through, but we've also had to be creative along the way where there wasn't a lot of documented guidance. I will say through my career, like as much as I've appreciated a lot of the external guidance or, things that are out there that can be used as open source, oftentimes it's using basic principles of security hygiene, what makes sense for the organization, and contextual management as far as driving the org to support it specifically, instead of saying, I read this in a book, this is how we're going to do it. And I think that's where taking these learnings is only going to add so much value to your career, because now business continuity, some people just never really cared about, like, yeah, we use AWS, we don't have to worry about it. It's like, yeah, if your office shuts down, now what? Can you still do your marketing? Can you still do your sales? Are you still able to engage? Those answers right now are getting answered very, I'm not going to say poorly, but I think it's a rough go, because now you're seeing a lot of layoffs happening. How do the waves of layoffs go? It's typically those folks that are underperforming, redundant, no longer required, but then you start getting into the very new. And the folks early in their careers, they might find themselves in that situation. Someone that's navigated like 4 or 5 times for I'm not going to say riffs, but career changing moments where maybe you have a really rough conversation with your leadership team saying, we have to do this. And if it's a number that is, bigger than 10%, it's not going to be easy, especially if you have a tiny team. And I've used the same strategy. I'm not going to get into it for this chat for every company I've been at. And, I've never been through one of those on the end where I found myself on the outside, but I've definitely tried in certain cases where it would have made sense. And I've definitely gone to bat for my team. And especially right now, like I have a team of 3 people and I'm looking around and it's a rough chat. So you can extrapolate this however you want. But I offer myself in those scenarios where it's like, cool, if we got to make a cut, here's how you're going to save the most amount of money. I'm going. And then the reaction from your own manager every time, it's usually pretty funny. But if they're ever like, that's a good call, that's going to be a rough conversation. But, you're playing a game of chicken at the same time. You're analytically looking at it from a data-driven standpoint. But if you're a people manager, if you want to be a CISO, you're going to have to learn how to deal with really tough decisions.
A good leader is someone who helps the people around them. Our guests shared their advice on how to get the most out of early career resources and where to find the best tools for learning as you build your skills. When talking with Ross, it's easy to see he's a great teacher. One of the best pieces of advice for young professionals is to pursue the right do-it-yourself education opportunities and maximize networking within the infosec community.
With technical knowledge, there's just a wealth of things that are out there, from doing things like taking SANS-related training to pursuing other online training. So there's so many providers out there like A Cloud Guru where you can go and learn AWS or Azure certifications. I've seen that really explode over the past couple years. Also, really listening to the technical conferences that are near you. Sometimes people really focus on the, let's say, black hat conferences that are a little bit pricier when there's a lot of local B-side conferences. There's a lot of local OWASP conferences of application security focused things that you can be involved in, that you can help reach out to. And I've really found the security community on LinkedIn to be a wealth of knowledge. If there's a tool that you'd like to learn more, see if somebody actually is on LinkedIn, one of the creators. Just message that person and say, hey, I found this really interesting. I'd love to learn more. And I've been really impressed at how much people are willing to talk about it. It's kind of like their child. They're excited when people take interest in their research and they're willing to, show you more what they're working on. And those little nuggets where you can build those personal relationships and continue to network from these technical conferences and training, I think is how we're going to build more subject matter experts in the field.
Part of Lisa's work includes her role with the organization Women in Security and Privacy, where she works to help underrepresented and minority infosec professionals have a seat at the table. Lisa thinks all of us have a role in helping more people of color, women, and others who have traditionally been shut out of opportunities.
I personally don't think that attracting underrepresented folks is the problem. I think that there are tons of talented people who want to and are in the field already. The problem I see more relates to gatekeeping, whether that's in the form of unreasonable job descriptions, extremely expensive training and certifications, lack of actual entry-level roles, or biased hiring practices.
Certifications are a hot topic among infosec pros. Some see them as essential for success. Some may rely on them as badges of honor. You'll find one true thing when asking about certifications. Their value is highly subjective, and everyone has a differing opinion about their usefulness. Our experts offered their points of view on the role of certificates in their success. Ross sees tremendous opportunity to learn from studying for certifications, and much less value in getting wrapped up in chasing the certifications themselves.
I believe studying for a certification is fantastic. There's so much knowledge that you gain. However, I'm not really hooked into taking a certification exam and paying the money and focusing on continuing your CPEs every year. So I'm probably going to say certifications nay, but the opportunity to study for them and gain the knowledge, yay. I think the biggest thing that's happened is just how much the community has grown. If you were to look in 2005, when I first started cybersecurity, this is right about when Facebook is, really starting to take off. LinkedIn's really not there at that point in time. So your ability to network with other folks was really limited by who you might have caught at a DEF CON conference and kept in contact with. Now there are literally hundreds of cyber conferences. And so I think there's so many more opportunities to find people to learn from compared to it used to be a little bit harder to find subject matter experts or people who had spent 10 years in the field. Now you're going to find a lot more people who have those skills that you can network and learn from.
JJ's advice on what certifications can add to the path to success as a CISO contains a return to basics and foundational learning. Here's JJ on the resources that have helped him learn the most and why certifications alone aren't enough.
So I pay for Pen Testers Academy. We're a diverse group, and so how someone likes to learn might be tangible, right? They want to be hands-on versus I want to read a book and I want to go the certificate route. And so providing a suite of available resources is kind of been the approach. The time that I have now, I like to read, but then make it practical, right? Read a chapter, apply it. How do I actually make this useful, right? What I'm reading in a book, right? Whether if I'm going for a certification or if I'm going for, an exam, when I read in a book and what the exam wants might not actually be applied to the real world because there's variables that are not seen from the instructor, from the exam creator. It's not possible, right? And that goes into the issues with certificates and these people who have 10 acronyms after their name because they have every single certificate after. I have a CISP, but do I feel that it was well worth it? 100%. But back to your question about what's the best way to learn now. There's a lot of these academies online. Pentester Academy, hackthebox.eu is a great CTF challenge. And so it depends because security in general is so diverse. So do you want to become a network security engineer? Do you want to become an enterprise security engineer? How do you get access to a Google or G Suite enterprise account? Well, how do I get access to AWS and not cost an arm and a leg? And so these are I think one of the issues with certificates is that they try to generalize security so much. They try to generalize the problem versus just get a basic understanding of how TCP/IP works. How does the OSI model is, right? The particular protocols that work and how the internet works. Get those basic understandings and then apply what's interesting to you around those frameworks, around those protocols to security, right? You're not going to become a crypto expert and then a network security expert and then a software engineer overnight. But if you pick these particular verticals and say, I'm going to dive into it because this is what's interesting, then match the right learnings to it, you're then able to apply and make it actual practical knowledge versus I have a book knowledge and I have just a basic understanding or I just have book understanding of how, encryption works, right? Well, tell me actually what's the SSL handshake? Why is it important, right? What is elliptical curve Diffie-Hellman? Why is that important? What's forward secrecy? These are the things that even I ask my team of, they'll say, hey, I learned something about encryption. And it's just that snowball effect of if you constantly, provide that, hey, what about this? Resources are Wikipedia, Hack the Box, Pen Testers Academy. But once you start getting practical, it's nice to have a conversation with whether you consider it a coach, a mentor, a manager, or even just a senior or lead engineer on the team to say, hey, I've read this. Can I bounce this idea off of you? And that was something that I, as I went through and got my certificates, early on in my career, I had the soundboard to constantly ask, right? Say, hey, what about this? Okay, great. this is what I read, but how to actually apply it to the real world.
Michael and I had a wonderful time hosting our 4 InfoSec leaders on Season 1 of CISO Insider. We learned a lot about what it takes to become an InfoSec leader and how we can become better in our roles as InfoSec marketing professionals. We hope you enjoyed the first season of CISO Insider. We're hard at work on Season 2 and looking forward to bringing you more insights and lessons from the industry's best and brightest leaders. Thanks for taking this journey with us. Thanks for listening to CISO Insider, a podcast created and sponsored by Nightfall AI, the industry's first cloud-native data loss prevention solution. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts. The ratings and reviews help more people find us. Special thanks to Wendell Topper for podcast production support. Learn more about Wendell's work at www.createch.us. That's CREATEK.us. Follow Nightfall on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Nightfall AI. That's Nightfall AI, and email us at marketing@nightfall.ai with questions, feedback, and suggestions about CISO Insider, including suggestions for CISOs you'd like to hear from. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again next time.